Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, students and staff, and the global audience of this auspicious event this afternoon. I welcome you to the University of Cape Town on behalf of the Chairperson of the University Council, Archbishop Njongonkulu Ndungani, who's sitting on the side here. On behalf of Mr. Lorne Hallendorf, the Students' Representative Council President, on behalf of myself as Vice-Chancellor, or as the Americans would call it, the University President, and I bring you particular greetings from our Chancellor, Mrs. Graça Machel, who would certainly have been here today with us were it not for the obvious reason that she is staying close to her husband, Madiba. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of you when I say to Mrs. Machel, our thoughts are with you. This will be a short talk. This will be a short talk, just to let you know what this moment in this hall, on this stage, means to us, to this university, for the first African-American United States President to address us. On the same spot where 47 years ago this month, Senator Robert F. Kennedy made one of the greatest speeches of his life and the most inspiring at that time for many of our lives. In 1966, a student leader of this university, Ian Robertson, had invited Kennedy to speak here. The apartheid government, furious at the visit, but scared about the diplomatic fallout of refusing the possible next president of the United States permission to enter, did the next best thing. It banned the 21-year-old student who'd invited him. Robertson was banned from any social or political gatherings. He was banned from seeing more than one person at a time, and because he was a white student, he was prohibited from going anywhere where black South Africans lived on pain of imprisonment. It's not clear if the government thought that he would be a bad influence on them or they on him, but it became, of course, illegal for him to attend the speech that he had caused to take place in this venue. Kennedy correctly identified how alone activists here felt in those dark days of the 1960s. But he reminded them, and the idealistic students he was addressing, and the faculty listening to him, that they were not alone, but were part of a global movement that stood for and fought for the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was an inspirational message. And he then used the words that today mark his grave at the Arlington National Cemetery alongside President John F. Kennedy. He said, "Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And, crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." Another South African who was prohibited from attending the talk was only a few miles away, out to sea, on the notorious Robben Island prison. With us today is Colin Eglin, former leader of the opposition Progressive Party and a UCT alumnus, who happened to be flying with Senator Kennedy in the charter plane on that very day that brought him from Johannesburg to Cape Town. Eglin recounts how at Kennedy's request, the plane did a loop around Robben Island and dipped its wing in salute to Nelson Mandela, whom Kennedy was obviously unable to meet. Mandela lived to return to the mainland 21 years later, turning those ripples of hope into a flood that overwhelmed South African apartheid and inspired the world. No public event can take place in South Africa today without paying homage to that man, now waging what we expect may be his last struggle in the hospital bed in Pretoria. As Nelson Mandela's life rests in the balance, we cannot but remember him with love, inspiration, hope, as well as impending loss. Perhaps Mandela's unique quality was his ability to reach out to all of us. and it is testimony to his charismatic leadership that in a country that had been dangerously on the brink of civil war, so many South Africans, across all the familiar divides of race, gender, religion, class, returned his embrace, in some cases tentatively and with residual uncertainty, but in most cases with profound respect and admiration, recognizing that his commitment to equality, freedom, and non-racialism was a commitment he made to the liberation of each one of us. He did not work alone, far from it, but he had the unique ability to inspire hope. When those on Robben Island were at their lowest ebb in the early 1970s and felt they had been forgotten by the outside world, when they thought they would never live to see a free South Africa, it was Rolihlahla Mandela who gave them hope. A man who valorized education, he encouraged them all to study so that they would be prepared one day to govern. And that ability to persuade us all to imagine a better future was the essence of his greatness once he was freed. He shares this quality with other great leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., who inspired belief in his dream. And it was the Yes We Can campaign of Barack Obama that inspired a nation to elect the first African-American president, and that won, too, the admiration of citizens of Africa for the man we look forward to welcoming this evening. President Obama's visit to South Africa is rich in symbolism, and this is, I imagine, likely to be one reason why he chose to speak in this hall at the University of Cape Town. And I suspect his choice of a university platform is also directly related to the more explicit goal of his visit, namely to promote economic relations between the USA and the African continent in ways that buoy the trajectory of economic growth. There are many drivers of renewal and growth. Perhaps the most significant are education, innovation, and preparing the next generation of leaders, movers and shakers, teachers, thinkers, entrepreneurs. Universities make an absolutely indispensable contribution to all of this. All our South African universities are committed to producing the next generation's economic leaders. So President Obama's particular emphasis on the power of the youth speaks directly to the relevance of a university setting. On this stage, 47 years ago, Robert Kennedy also said, and I'm quoting, "In the world we would like to build, South Africa could play an outstanding role." We at UCT, along with colleagues at many other South African universities, have taken that responsibility to heart. A cornerstone of this university's mission is to educate the next generation of leadership for the African continent. Today, 3,000 students from 39 African countries are enrolled here. They will become the professionals, public intellectuals, political leaders, captains of industry and development for the continent. And their shared experience here will create networks that drive collaboration for the next 40 years. Incidentally, we take pleasure also in enrolling some 900 American semester abroad students each year, deepening our ties with American universities, and once they graduate, with America's future leaders. Along with other South African universities with similar global networks, we play that outstanding role that Kennedy referred to, not just in Africa, but in the world. But UCT also represents something more. It is a leading research university that offers the prospects for bilateral relations with Africa and the rest of the world that transcend the hierarchies and paternalism of North-South relations in the past. There are precious few research universities on the continent. In the Times Higher Education Top 400 Global Universities, which focuses heavily on research as a criterion, there are only 4 from Africa, north and south of the Sahara, and all 4 are from South Africa. The continent has made progress in expanding access to higher education, but over 15 years, the numbers of students have increased 3 times more than the funding available, and as a result, the quality of that education is often jeopardized, and in particular, the university's research agenda takes a back seat. The question may be asked, is this a priority in a developing low or middle income country? My answer is an unequivocal yes. The need for research expertise, nurtured by research-strong universities, is global and applies equally to developing and developed nations, even if there are particular challenges of resource allocation. Unless Africa wants to remain the consumers of other people's knowledge and innovation, the recipients of received wisdom with no critical capacity locally to interpret, challenge, or advance alternative views of the world, unless we see ourselves as unable to contribute to global knowledge, unless we think that all global technologies are locally appropriate and that we do not need the capacity to develop locally relevant solutions, unless these are our views, Africa needs to further their own research capacity. That capacity resides first and foremost in research universities. But every country needs at least one, and middle-income countries like South Africa should support several. Moreover, we should set our standards high. If we want independent thought and leadership and a capacity to determine what is best for ourselves, then we need not only researchers and research institutions, but they need to be on par with our peers in the global north. Importantly, we also have a duty to advance global knowledge in ways that can best be done from the perspective of our local context. An excellent example is the Square Kilometre Array, the largest radio telescope in the world, one of the largest scientific experiments ever, requiring thousands of dishes, mostly based in the Northern Cape, but also in other African countries and Australia. This investment is being made not because such an understanding is a priority for a developing nation compared to the needs for water, housing, and sanitation, but because we can and should contribute to the global knowledge about the origins of the universe, and we have a unique ability to do so. Finally, research universities in developing countries will play a critical role in educating the next generation of academics for the continent at large. If there are too few credible research departments led by top academics with a critical mass of researchers and laboratories, then aspiring academics will have little option but to study abroad. And the evidence over many decades shows that the rate of return from studies abroad is a very expensive and inefficient investment. Thus, it is clear that one of the bottlenecks to development of the continent is the absence of research universities, but it can be different, and the evidence of this lies in the caliber of the South African research universities and a handful of flagship universities across the continent. African universities that are punching way above their weight if one looks at their budgets and their workloads. Growing a research university requires significant additional resources, and this is generally not something that governments in poor countries support. Therefore, one of the key contributions that can be made through international partnerships, such as those which form the basis of President Obama's commitment to economic development in Africa, is to build up research universities across the continent. And in this, the South African universities can be strong partners. Ladies and gentlemen, democracies create privileged spaces where critical analysis and debate can occur. One such space is the universities. It is in no small measure through the limited degree of autonomy that this university had in 1966, even as it was being restricted and pressured by the apartheid state, that the protected space existed that could allow Senator Kennedy to be invited here at all, and that gave him a platform to speak truth to power. It seems particularly fitting that President Obama should choose a university setting to make his principal policy speech on Africa. It is recognition of the importance of the independence of universities, their role in guarding democracy, their focus on the next generation, their contribution to providing human capital, their role in innovation, and their promoting development in the numerous ways that they do. I invite you to join me in recognizing the important role that institutions of higher learning and research play in shaping our future, and to look forward to fertile partnerships with developed nations such as the USA in advancing that role. Thank you very much.